Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's me again, your master of ceremony for this conference, and my name is Tai Zihao. Just in case you're wondering what I'm wearing for today and yesterday, it's batik, one of our national costume. And before we start here, there are some housekeeping rules. There will not be live and questioning sessions during the entire conference. If participants have any questions, please type out in the chat box and mention to whom the question is directed to, along with your email address. Answers will be sent via email after the conference. The link for attendance and certificate of this conference will be given at the end of the topic. The recordings of this conference will be emailed to you after the conclusion of the conference. Kindly keep your phones on silent mode throughout the entire conference. Ladies and gentlemen, all countries are reeling from the pandemic that brought the phone to its knees. We know from yesterday that any progress made towards the SDGs have taken a few steps back. Therefore, today, the final topic of this conference will be focused on the post-pandemic recovery of the intangible cultural heritage. For this session, I'm proud to present your moderator, Associate Professor Hasno Jamal Saidon, Director of Tuanku Fauzia Museum and Gallery, University Science Malaysia. Associate Professor Hasno, involved in various high-profile designing pioneering programs in UNIMAS, UMS, and USM, including final year showcases such as Chipta and Rintis, curating milestones exhibitions such as the first electronic art show and Hyperview in 1997, Takong in 2004, and co-founded eArts Asian Online in the year 2000. He contributed to local arts and academics under various capacities as program head, deputy dean, museum director, board member, chief jury, curator, external examiner, and curriculum advisor. Professor Hasno has curated more than 30 local exhibitions and engaged in 18 research projects since 1996. He authored 24 books, presented and published 25 papers and articles, and was highly regarded amongst his academic peers internationally. Professor Hasno, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. A very good afternoon to all. Welcome to day 3 of the International Conference on Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICH. Today's session will focus on post-pandemic recovery of ICH. 6 speakers will be presenting. They are Dr. Patricia Ann Hardwick, Ms. Jin Yung So, Dr. Maihara Megumi, Dr. Parita Chalempau Konantakol, Mr. Nicholas Yo, and Mr. Muhammad Shahrin Abdullah. I hope I pronounced their name correctly. My name is Hasno Saidon, and I will be moderating this session today from now until 6 p.m. Each panel will be introduced by me, followed by a 20-minute presentation. Today's topic is post-pandemic recovery of ICH. ICH, or Intangible Cultural Heritage, understood as communities, skills, customs, rituals, traditional practices, and creativities have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. Festivals were cancelled, and traditional performers and artisans lost their market. In April 2020, UNESCO launched a global online survey to grasp the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic around the world, asking the following questions. Question number 1, How is the pandemic impacting living heritage? Number two, how is living heritage adapting to the crisis? And number three, how are the communities mobilizing their living heritage to help them face the pandemic? Today's session will present some of the findings and case studies from UNESCO to inspire our post-pandemic action. The first paper today is entitled Pandemic Challenges and Endemic Opportunities for Mak Yong Performance in Kelantan, Malaysia. It will be presented by Dr. Patricia Ann Hartwig. Allow me to read her biography here. She is a senior lecturer and research fellow, Music and Performing Art Department and Malay Civilization Institute, Sultan Idris Education University, Malaysia, also known as UPSI. She holds a PhD in folklore and ethnomusicology and anthropology from Indiana University, Bloomington. Her research has been published in Bookbird, Journal of International Children's Literature, ASEAN Ethnology, JMBRAS, Folklore Forum, Midwestern Folklore and Music and Medicine. Her research has been supported by Jabatan Warisan Negara Malaysia, the Institute of Sacred Music, Yale, Fulbright, IPIS, and the Jacob K. Javits Fellowship Program under the U.S. Department of Education. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Dr. Patricia.
Thank you, Salamat Petang dan Salamat Sejahtera. Today, the title of my paper is Pandemic Challenges and Endemic Opportunities for Mak Yong Performance in Kelantan, Malaysia. So music, dance, theater, and other forms of performance are part of Malaysia's cultural heritage, and they play a very important role in traditional healing practices, rites of passage, and cultural collaboration within and between communities in Malaysia. The sustainability and the transmission of performance forms has long been a topic of discussion by folklorists and ethnomusicologists. Expanding fields like ecomusicology explore relationships between music, materialism, and the environment, and discussions of ownership, continuity, nationalism, and heritage politics are particularly relevant to the sustainability of traditional forms of performance in Southeast Asia. Rapid modernization, urbanization, political movements, and debates regarding appropriate forms of religious practice influence transmission and transformation of traditional forms. Performance forms that are economically unsustainable or that are deemed irrelevant to current cultural concerns are often discouraged, while performance forms that have been officially recognized as intangible cultural heritage are transformed in a process that recognizes them as national heritage or tourism commodities. Mak Yong, a form of Malay theater, was proclaimed a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO in 2005 and incorporated into the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2008. As folklorist Michael Dillon Foster notes, quote, "In some places, a UNESCO designation is seen as a financial boon. In some places, it is a point of pride and identity. In some places, it is a burden. And elsewhere, it is merely an adornment," unquote. So citing Mak Yong's links to ritual and pre-Islamic religious system, as well as transgendered performance and the prominent role of women as performers, Parti Islam Malaysia, the leading party in Kelantan, actually banned Mak Yong in 1991 in Kelantan. While the selection by UNESCO brought Mak Yong an international visibility, and it encouraged the development of a federally supported urban form, the UNESCO declaration and subsequent inscription has had but a marginal effect on the continued viability of Matyong as a community-based art in Kelantan and Terengganu. On September 25th, 2019, the past government lifted the official ban on Matyong through prescriptions on public female performances, although there's prescriptions on public female performances remain in place. This lifting of the ban led to a development of a National Department for Culture and Arts, or JKKN-sponsored Sharia-compliant form of Matyong. And that is a form that has all male performers, and that developed shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic. So we can see that Matyong has been a bit contentious over time, and that there have been efforts to ban it as well as to revitalize it. Now, when we come up to the pandemic, we can see the Malaysian government reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic by issuing 4 movement control orders, an MCO, conditional movement control order, a CMCO, the movement control order, MCO, a conditional movement control order, CMCO, a recovery movement control order, RMCO, and a National Recovery Plan, or NPR. And these measures were created to protect public health, and they restricted movement and ability of Malaysians to gather. And this was to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So these movement control orders were in place from March 18th, 2020 to December 31st, 2021. Movement restrictions had negative impacts on already marginalized traditional performing arts communities in Malaysia. And in Kelantan, sometimes the pandemic lockdowns could last a bit longer, and that was due to regional infection rates. So COVID-19 lockdowns further isolated traditional performers, and they eliminated the supplementary means of earning a daily wage for nearly 2 years. So this paper will look at how the COVID-19 pandemic really affected members of the Kelantanese village arts community, and what programs and projects were developed during this period to try to assist artists during the pandemic and into the endemic period. And as we can see in November of 2021, you could actually begin to have ritual healing events of Matyong Mine 3. Although those performances were possible, getting the police permission remained very difficult, and the time constraints were very strict. And if required SOPs were not followed, performances could be stopped by the police, and large fines could be imposed both on performers and the hosts of performance. So if we look at ethnomusicology and its approach to sustainability, it really emphasizes collaborative work between community members, researchers, and advocates rather than top-down approaches to sustainability. Jeff Todd Titan, who's an ethnomusicologist, notes that the best practices for sustainability arise from partnerships among ethnomusicologists, folklorists, and music culture insiders, which can include community leaders, scholars, and musicians. Matarasso emphasizes the importance of mobilizing a bottom-up approach, whereby local communities are invited to participate in planning and implementation of cultural sustainability projects. And as we heard yesterday, Tan Subeng also looks at sustainability through the utilization of bottom-up approaches that are vital to enhancing vibrant local cultures and communities. Okay, so while ethnomusicologists have written on their experiences and their approaches, some of these are yet to be implemented in Malaysia. One of the ways that ethnomusicologists try to give back to musicians and communities is providing community members with access to strategic models and conservational techniques. Inclusion makes communities of practice part of the decision-making process, and it facilitates long-term sustainability of art forms as the communities are introduced to new audiences. But there's also an education element, whereas the audiences are also educated to appreciate these traditional performances. So this is what ethnomusicologists have done to try to encourage sustainability of traditional arts. So what did we do? Well, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I worked with a research team, and I collaborated with colleagues, NGOs, and Malaysian government agencies to create documentary and performance opportunities for traditional performers. So these performance events included the filming of Dewa Pecil at JKKN in Kelantan, and in April of 2021, that was closed due to COVID restrictions. So we only had the performers there with us. the filming of Raja Muda Latleng in Kampung Gabus to Uban in November of 2021, and that was a village performance. The filming of Gading Bertime in Kampung Lepa Selising Pasir Putih, which was done by my colleague, Dr. Farah Dayana. And then there was another filming by JKKN Kelantan, also of Gading Bertime at a resort in Tot Bali in November of 2021. Other events that we arranged included interview sessions on vocal sustainability with traditional Mak Yong practitioners, and as well as the sponsorship and documentation of a Sema Angin in Kampung Gabus to Uban in June of 2022. Each of these projects contributed to the preservation of knowledge of performance in an archival form, and compensation was given to the traditional performers for the performance and the interviews, and that provided some form of financial support. The Sema Angin event actually addressed physical and emotional health concerns of an entire lineage of whole family of Mak Yong performers who had been unable to perform during the lockdown period. So in addition to these events, there also was other Mak Yong events that were going on in Kelantan at the time. JKKN has its own performance troupe, and they were performing during the pandemic lockdowns. And these events employed JKKN trained artists, but they incorporated some village musicians from different regions of Kelantan when they performed in different districts. Okay, so what does this all mean for local people? Well, in an interview with Zawawi bin Ismail, who's a traditional Mak Yong performer, a totri, and a guru of Silat Seni Cantik, and I interviewed him in November of 2021, he expressed a real concern for the continuation of traditional Mak Yong performance in Kelantan. He noticed this is not just due to COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, it has to do with deeper structural issues that serve to alienate an entire generation from learning traditional village arts. In an environment where Mak Yong practitioners were unable to perform for 28 years, young people under the age of 30 had no knowledge of Mak Yong. He argued if young people had never seen it, how could they be interested in learning to perform? And he reasoned that with consistent exposure and integration of the tradition back into community life, that might facilitate a natural interest to learn more. He said now when we have programs that are developed to try to teach young people Mak Yong in villages, it's very difficult to convince them to want to learn. They ask him, why should I learn? What future can I have as a traditional performer if there's no opportunities for me to perform in my own community? And I'm going to read some of his words that were translated from our conversation that was in Malayan Kelantanese. Quote, if you want my opinion, I feel that the future for Mak Yong is very dark from the perspective of wanting to have performances like we had before. If you want to follow the original form of the performance, truly, I feel it is dark. Because now there are no longer people interested. Why are there no longer people interested? Because we were unable to perform for 28 years. The youth under 28 years of age know nothing because they never followed it. When you do not follow, there's no interest. Where is the interest supposed to come from? An interest in Mak Yong comes from a person who follows the tradition. How is that interest supposed to arise when for 28 years they cannot see it, meaning that they know nothing of the tradition? They know nothing. They've never seen it. After that, an interest can only arise if they follow. When they don't follow, there's no interest. So if you want to teach them now, when people are not interested, the youth say they just don't want to learn. So if they don't want to learn, who are we to teach? When the next generation doesn't want to learn, how can there be a continuation of the tradition? Who do we fault for this? In our opinion, if they did not stop us from performing for 28 years, the tradition would not die. The reason it is dying is because for 28 years, we could not perform. The new generation never had a chance to see it, meaning they don't even know what Mak Yong is. What's Mak Yong? They don't know anything. So now we want to ask youth to study Mak Yong. What is Mak Yong? They don't know. Even if they study and they become skilled, what are we going to do? We still can't have a performance. Why should they study? Those who have become skilled and studied, how does it benefit them? That is the problem. This is the issue that we face for the future. The longer it goes on, the darker the future gets. Dark. At the end, the tradition will die out. That is my opinion. So there were social challenges in rural Kelantan, and many of these structural challenges existed in Kelantan pre-COVID, but some of them may have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. One of these challenges is poverty and lack of employment opportunity. Another is that many young people leave Kelantan for work in other Malaysian states and don't stay in the community. So even if they study, they're not there to perform. Another is limited familiarity or appreciation of traditional performing arts, and this is in part due to the 28-year ban. So what are the COVID-19 specific challenges? Well, the COVID-19 lockdowns decimated the Kelantanese village economies that relied on daily wage labor. For those who are rubber tappers, and as we know, Kelantan is a huge rubber tapping area, even though there was a huge demand for rubber gloves, the price of raw rubber actually fell during the pandemic, which meant that many smallholders did not tap their rubber trees. The inflation rate in Kelantan was 2.8 in October 2021, which actually surpassed the Malaysian national CPI rate of 2.1 in September. So you have a higher inflation rate actually in Kelantan. No performances at all were allowed in the villages due to the lockdowns. And then to compound that, children could not attend school for more than a year and a half. Their internet availability was limited in most villages, which made online learning very difficult, if not impossible. And many children did not possess digital devices that enabled them to attend online class, or if their family did have such a device, they often had to share it with many family members. So those are the challenges. Now, what are the opportunities for traditional Kelantanese arts during the pandemic? Well, we know a single program can't address the intergenerational impact of a ban on performance for 28 years and a complete cessation of all performance for 2 years during pandemic lockdowns. However, as Chezawawi notes, without any intervention at all, the future continuation of the village tradition of Mak Yong is very bleak. In 2021, Cendana, which is a Malaysian government granting agency, accepted applications for grants to fund traditional performers to teach youth in their community for a year. I worked with my graduate student assistant, Nur Sabiha binti Hatta. We nominated together a Mak Yong family who was facing financial difficulties during the pandemic for an Adiguru grant. These grants support traditional practitioners through 1, the payment of a wage to teach traditions to the next generation, 2, financial support to build a community stage, 3, financial support to buy instruments, and 4, financial support to upgrade and purchase costumes. So the person whom we nominated was Wan Midin bin Wan Majid. He was chosen as a Cendana Adiguru for 2021 and 2022. His students were initially restricted to his own grandchildren, and he began their instruction in his household during the pandemic lockdowns. But as Chezawawi noted, he faced a lot of difficulty in trying to encourage other members of the community outside of his own family to study Mak Yong, even when these lockdowns began to ease. So the Cendana Adiguru grants were just one program that were designed to help facilitate intergenerational transmission of traditional arts during the pandemic. However, it's yet unclear if this program will continue. Another program that was developed to address a crucial need was a food program, because not just financial survival, but even feeding one's family became very difficult, particularly through the 3rd lockdown. And sustainability of performing arts in this sense meant that traditional artists needed to help in meeting some of these very basic daily needs, including enough food to feed their families. So to try and help meet these needs, I worked with Pauline Fan and Eden Koo at the NGO of Pusaka, and together we communicated with younger members of the Kelantanese performing arts community, and we were able to get emergency food aid distributed to more than 30 performing arts families into food drives. So the other issue that came up during interviews with performers during the filming and documentation projects during the pandemic is that many elderly performers who rely on oral tradition for transmission and performance had actually begun to forget key details of their stories. They hadn't been able to perform for a long period of time. They'd been isolated from other members of a performance community. So it really highlighted that the knowledge regarding Mak Yong performance in the oral tradition is something that's communally held. And so what I tried to do to help with this was work with members of the Kelantanese performing arts community during lockdown to develop a publication that could make at least one Mat Yong story more accessible. And this is Dewa Pachil. It's a story that's used for healing. This book, Dewa Pachil, a Mat Yong tale told by Ali bin Ibrahim, was published in August of 2022 by Upsi Press. It features an ethno-poetic rendering of the story of Dewa Pachil as told to me in 2005 by the late Mat Yong performer Ali bin Ibrahim. It also provides translation of the tale in English and Malay. I worked with Kamal Nawi, who you can see here. He's a young Kelantanese artist, to develop illustrations from ethnographic documentation of Mat Yong. I also worked with my co-researcher, Farah Diana binti Muhammad Jufri, to clarify the Kelantanese transcription and to develop Malay translation of the tale. So this story can be found in a few academic dissertations in an abbreviated form, but it has yet to be published in a book that's widely available to the Malaysian reading public. And copies of the book have already been distributed to the National Heritage Department, the National Museum Library, and will also be given to Mat Yong performers and their families. It's also on sale. You can find it on Shopee under Upsi University Press. So in conclusion, the complete cessation of performance during the COVID-19 pandemic and the long period of lockdown in Malaysia really did have a negative effect on an already embattled community that's attempting to revive performance practice after nearly 3 decades of prohibition in Kelantan. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the implementation of the 4 movement control orders, effectively suspended all village performance for nearly 2 years. And these restrictions extended even to Mat Yong Mind 3 healing performances, which in the past almost allowed a repository for some traditional performance practice. So right now, what we can see is that there are a core group of young male musicians who've studied and developed into active village performers, but we still have very few female performers who train with their families, and even fewer who continue to perform after they reach adulthood and marriage. Female performance is still prohibited. And extensive work needs to be done to develop a plan together with members of the Mat Yong performance community for long-term safeguarding and sustainability of the village Mat Yong tradition. One way forward that has been suggested by the traditional practitioners is to focus on the facilitation of performances and programs at the village level, so that Kelantanese youth will be able to learn and appreciate their own performance heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patricia, for the presentation. I will do the summary at the end of today's session, okay? All right, let me introduce the next presenter. The next presenter is Ms. Jing Yung Seo. She will present a paper entitled Icich, or Intangible Cultural Heritage and Resilience before COVID-19 and after COVID-19. Allow me to read her biography. Ms. Jing Yung Seo is a program specialist, International Information and Networking Center for Intangible Cultural Heritage in the Asia-Pacific region under the auspices of UNESCO, Jeonju, Republic of Korea. Ms. Jing Yung Seo is a program specialist at Icich CAP. Before she joined the Icich CAP, she worked at the Embassy of Korea in USA and Australia, National Museum of Korean Contemporary History, and research institutes focusing on cultural diplomacy and cultural education. In Icich CAP, she preceded many projects to raise awareness and safeguard Icich. For example, organizing UNESCO capacity building workshop, collaborated with CRI HAP for 3 years, working with NGOs for publication or conference. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Ms. Lim Yong Siu.
Thank you, Professor Sidon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear my voice clearly? Okay, see, my name is Jin Young So, as I've introduced, Program Specialist at ICCAP and UNESCO Category 2 Center in the field of Intangible Cultural Heritage. On behalf of ICCAP, I'm very glad to be here and share the Center's projects with you under the title of Icich and Resilience. Today, I will discuss about ICCAP's projects, massive open online courses, MOOC, which were developed and launched during the COVID-19. In other words, the presentation will be dealt how they were set, produced, and streamed for the worldwide Icich stakeholders. By following the steps, I would like to deliver the underlying message of needs in cooperation for resilience of Icich. Since the breakout of COVID-19, it changed the way of thinking entirely, not only coping with an unprecedented pandemic, but also new ways of problem solving were needed for all. As Icich only exists when it's transmitted by people, the pandemics made people to rethink human security. At the same time, such hardship put Icich in serious danger caused by distancing policies. To support communities in facing the crisis, in April 2020, UNESCO launched an online surveying platform on living heritage experience and the COVID-19 pandemic, as Professor Sidon mentioned at first. The primary objective of the survey was to enhance learning and understanding about safeguarding living heritage in the context of the ongoing pandemic. Understanding the roles of Icich and resilience, 3 recommendations were made. And actually, the first one is help communities build back better by strengthening recovery support mechanism to living heritage bearers at the local level, including through local governance structures. 2, take advantage of digital technology to increase the visibility and understanding of living heritage. And 3, strengthen and amplify the linkage between safeguarding living heritage and emergency preparedness, response, and recovery plans and programs. Before these recommendations, ICCAP has responded step by step by applying new ways to achieve its function, information sharing and network building. Every planned event was changed into an online format. It was not easy at first, actually. Most of the participants were not familiar with online meeting tools. However, starting with Icich webinar series on higher education in 2019, the 2020 World Forum of Icich and many other events were held in hybrid formats successfully. Particularly, participants of the 2021 Icich Youth Summit held in parallel to the 2021 World Forum for Icich were gathered in the metaverse, as you see in the photo. To safeguard Icich, the most important directions were to share information and transmit Icich continuously by people without severance, whatever the hardship is. ICCAP's purpose was light on there. ICCAP also launched a project for MOOC in this period. One is Living Heritage and Sustainable Development, and the other is Bringing Living Heritage to the Classroom in Asia Pacific. As UNESCO emphasized, education is an important part of safeguarding Icich, and integration between the two becomes more important than ever. When schools are closed, students were deprived of their chances to learn. Even culture was apart from their lives. Not only students, but also teachers became senseless. Paying attention that the young generation is familiar with an online tool, we start to make MOOC. Also, the advantage of online, which has no border, can make it possible to distribute the courses everywhere in the world. Starting in earnest, I would like to examine the background and its rationale a bit deeply, which why ICCAP started a project on linking Icich education and how COVID situation changed the way of proceeding. 2 MOOCs presented are aligned with the same purpose, but different in details, so that my presentation starts from the broader concept to narrow it down. Authored in the Article 2.3 and the 14 of the 2003 Convention, education is one of the important measures for safeguarding the Icich. At the 12th Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage held in Jeju, Korea 2017, UNESCO adopted ICH and education as a priority. Since then, the Secretary of the 2003 Convention continued its efforts to develop partnership with educational institutions to support the implementation of ICH and education into formal and informal education in different levels with the help of intersectoral cooperation between education sector and living heritage entity. Under the goal for achieving sustainable development goals for quality education, ICH welcomes such driving forces and set the forefront to facilitate the transition. ICH has been working with the UNESCO Bangkok office and the Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding under auspices of UNESCO, called APSEU, to promote teaching and learning ICH in schools since 2019. Not only the operation of the pilot projects for ICH school education, but also the survey on teaching and learning with and about intangible cultural heritage in Asia and the Pacific were conducted. Over the subject-oriented classes, the pilot projects were planned to show integration between subjects with ICH elements. Particularly in second terms of the pilot, 21 schools from 6 countries, Nepal, Thailand, Cambodia, Korea, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, with the cooperation of regional UNESCO office in Kathmandu, Almaty, and Phnom Penh participated. With these results, guidance book Bringing Living Heritage to Classroom in the Asia-Pacific region was published, and animation series Teaching and Learning with Intangible Cultural Heritage in the Asia-Pacific were made. For extending the realm of reaching, developing MOOCs for teachers were followed. In the meantime, with the Living Heritage entity, another tripartite cooperation was settled. While the demand for online courses on ICH exists, UNESCO has so far given priority to face-to-face training programs under its Global Capacity Building Program. However, over the past years, it has increasingly strengthened its collaboration with university to support the integration of ICH in their programs. It is interesting to note that the overall results framework for the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage adopted by state party also includes a reference to the role of university in strengthening human capacity for safeguarding. An increasing number of MOOC is being developed in different thematic areas, notably in universities. However, when analyzing the landscape of existing MOOC, UNESCO realized that there was a gap. No introductory courses on the theme of safeguarding living heritage and sustainable development with a reference to the 2003 Convention has so far been offered. While it provides an excellent opportunity to reach out students, young peoples, as well as NGOs and government officials who have an interest in ICH. With many collected data from the Asia-Pacific region and expertises, ICH did on board with SDG Academy in developing the first MOOC on ICH presenting the UNESCO curriculum in an online format. The MOOC on Living Heritage and Sustainable Development opened on January 24 officially. 13 instructors selected from all of the world joined to deliver lectures. As 6-week self-paced courses, the main objective of the course is to strengthen knowledge and awareness on the interdependence of safeguarding of ICH and sustainable development. The detailed syllabus is presented here actually. The course is for anyone new to the concept of ICH who wants to understand what intangible cultural heritage is, what is important to people's well-being, and what role it plays in the lives of people, including young people, graduate school students, and advanced undergrad students interested in the key concepts and practices of sustainability and global issues. And practitioners also and professionals engaged in living heritage safeguarding who want to refresh their knowledge on the key concept of safeguarding of ICH and want to learn more about the relationship between living heritage and sustainable development. To this end, the steps were not easy at all. The contents and themes were clear for each instructor as they are well-known experts in the field, though the most complex part was filming itself. As travel was limited because of COVID-19, all coordinations were done via online. Even though there are many advantages of online, there are definite drawbacks that we cannot avoid. The filming was done in online, not the studio, Therefore, each CAP provided guidelines for shooting, ran the technical sessions, and was with them through online when they were shooting in local. Even the littles, like considering your reflection, the audio equipment for sound and angles were new for all. However, in present, the truth is they become the valuable experience, and the such cooperation led over 2,000 registered students. For the other cases, the Bangkok office and each CAP conducted an online training workshop for experts of Icich and school education for 4 days from October 27 to 30, 2020. The workshop was originally planned to be held offline at the National Intangible Heritage Center in Korea, but the format was changed due to the COVID-19 as an online. After the workshop, pilot schools were chosen to implement the projects in 6 countries above mentioned. The main purpose is to find and introduce various Icich education cases in schools. The pilot project was guaranteed its autonomy for each country to proceed in reflecting its own circumstances. For Koreans cases, each CAP facilitated the process with experts from the diverse levels, such as professors from the University of Education, government officials who is in charge of heritage education. Pilot classes were conducted from May to June 2021. Each school chose the Icich elements to focus considering its regional basis, students' levels for understanding, etc. Shingal Elementary School conducted its class with the theme of Namsadang Nori, itinerant trumpet performance. Wolgok Elementary School went with Yeondeunghae, Lantern Lighting Festival. Osan Middle School chose 하회 별신구 탈놀이, mask dance drama of 하회. And Kunyong Middle School talked about 김장, making and sharing kimchi. As instructors of the MOOC, experts reorganized and reflected these cases into MOOC modules. So did in 6 countries facilitators and the coordinators. It was launched officially on April 22, 2022. This courses provides key resources and guidance for teachers and people interested in education and culture on why and how to integrate living heritage into their lessons and extracurricular activities in the school. Such lessons and activities aim to make learning more contextualized, relevant, and engaging for students, while they help raise awareness about the importance of safeguarding living heritage. During the courses, participants will take a step-by-step approach to develop a lesson plan or a school activity connected to a living heritage element of their choice. The detailed syllabus is presented here also. Regarding the producing, this could be overlapping with the upper cases, same as the most hardship part was scheduling and online works. If this project was in action under normal situation, we could freely visit the schools and meet the students as many times as we can and invite every expert and teacher together to share their experience directly. Additionally, for better understanding the elements, it was possible to meet practitioners or visit their workshop for hands-on experience. However, under the COVID situation, only available option was online or limited face-to-face meeting. The pilot classes were delayed a few times and shooting was done via online or just a personal thing, with the help of online tools. Such left much to be desired, actually. Therefore, in promotion, for supplementing and responding to the gap if there are by any chance caused by online accessibility, instructor-led cohort, which includes an orientation and 5 weekly live tutorial sessions, was accompanied. The tutorial sessions provide an opportunity to exchange information and ideas with instructor and fellow learners, and direct feedbacks from instructors on your newly developed lesson plan activity. The result was highly successful, actually, deeply appreciated for all participants for these projects. For conclusion, this presentation outlined each CAP's projects done during the COVID-19 period. The most notable change was applying online platforms to proceed its projects. Particularly in integration of Icich and education, MOOC were developed for different targets with different themes. In general, Advantage of e-learning platforms are it is possible to present diverse teaching and learning methods. It has flexibility by making it independent from time and space. Also, it makes access to more people, more data at the same time with lower cost. It gives more chance to the disabled, and more importantly, it is available for education tracking by using learning management system. However, at the same time, disadvantage should be thought, not discipline to manage own education, marginalized groups of technical deficiency, and difficulty of developing qualified platforms and contents. Following the COVID situation got relieved, Icich by collaborating with the UNESCO Bangkok office is holding and will be held MOOC promotional online seminars, but also face-to-face national teachers workshop with UNESCO Regional Office and National Commission, where pilot projects were done. The center tried and is trying to provide quality information and in the line of effective measures for safeguarding Icich during the crisis. The new measures might have pros and cons and need complementary measures, though it is sure that the direction is right, and when the cooperation among all stakeholders are kept, the power of resilience the culture has will be flourished. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seo, for the presentation. The following presentation is entitled Post-Pandemic Restoration of Japanese Traditional Performing Arts from the Perspective of Conservation Techniques. It will be presented by Dr. Maihara Megumi. She is the head of Intangible Cultural Properties Section, Department of Intangible Cultural Heritage, National Research Institute for Cultural Properties, Tokyo, Japan. Ms. Maihara is involved in research on intangible cultural heritage, in particular, traditional Japanese performing arts. Currently, she is also focusing on the less visible aspects of Japanese traditional performing arts during the COVID-19 pandemic, namely techniques related to upholding the performing arts. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Dr. Maihara Megumi.
My name is Megumi Maihara from Tokyo National Research Institute for Cultural Properties, Japan. I am happy to attend this conference. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend in person, but if you have any comments on the presentation, I would appreciate it if you could send them to me via email. Let me begin my presentation, Post-Pandemic Restoration of Japanese Traditional Performing Arts from the Perspective of Conservation Techniques. Introduction. Japan continues to be impacted by COVID-19, and traditional performing arts are no exception. In this presentation, I will spotlight Japan's initiatives for the restoration of traditional performing arts after the pandemic from the perspective of conservation techniques. Conservation techniques refer to techniques for making items that are indispensable to the transmission of traditional performing arts, such as musical instruments, costumes, and stage props. Traditional performing arts are marking a recovery trend when looking at the changes in the numbers of performances. And the number of performances can be assessed to a certain degree by collecting information. However, Any impacts on the conservation techniques that support traditional performing arts are more difficult to visualize. For this reason, we must bear in mind that the impacts of COVID-19 on Japanese traditional performing arts are casting a long shadow, not only on performers, but also on theaters, auditoriums, and bearers of conservation techniques. In other words, it is only after proper measures are established from the perspective of the restoration of conservation techniques that traditional performing arts will head toward recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic in the true sense of the word. Methodology. First, we collected basic data for analyzing the parts that performances of Japanese traditional performing arts have taken amid COVID-19. Based on the investigation that Tokyo National Research Institute for Cultural Properties has been carrying out since April 2020, we examined changes in the numbers of performances that have been given and the numbers that have been cancelled on account of COVID-19. Next, we turned to the impacts of COVID-19 on conservation techniques. As these impacts are unable to be gauged from the status of performing arts performances, we examined the case example of Tokyo Wagaki, a famous shamisen manufacturing company in Japan that had once been on the brink of going out of business. The shamisen is a musical instrument widely related to traditional performing arts such as kabuki, bunraku, classical Japanese dance, and Japanese music concerts, and Tokyo Wagaki is one of the largest manufacturers of shamisen. By collecting information and conducting an interview investigation, we investigated the chronology of how news of Tokyo Wagaki's crisis of business closure was received by stakeholders of performing arts and the general public, and how it led to a social movement. Findings and observation. First, let us examine the relationship between the Japanese traditional performing arts performances and the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly in terms of three turning points, figures 1, 2, 3. Turning point 1 was characterized by a sudden increase in the cancellation of performances. On February 26, 2020, the then Prime Minister called for 2 weeks of restraint from holding nationwide scale events. Turning point 2 came immediately after the state of emergency began to be lifted in phases and was lifted throughout the country on May 25. Nevertheless, the situation with traditional performing arts performances saw a reversal, and the numbers that were held overlooked the numbers that were cancelled. At a glance, it seemed that signs of recovery were emerging, but the fact that these performances and events were held under conditions that restricted seating capacity should not be overlooked. Turning point 3 is when the state of emergency was reinstated in Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and Hyogo, and COVID-19 saw further spreading. Fortunately, the numbers of performances increased and turned to recovery. The reason for this is unclear, but it is coincided with the announcement of a government-supported project for the restoration of arts and culture activities. After turning point 3, the numbers of performances continued to fluctuate in reaction to the state of emergency and quasi-state of emergency issued by the government in response to the status of COVID-19, but the fluctuation calmed down as a whole. Even though a careful look reveals that the numbers of performances stood at lower levels compared to 2 years ago. Next, let us take a look at the impacts on conservation techniques, which are difficult to visualize in numbers, in reference to the case example of Tokyo Wagaki, the largest shamisen manufacturer in Japan, and its crisis of business closure. News of this crisis began to spread from around June 2020 via social media. I have personally conducted interviews at Tokyo Wagaki Fig 4, documented the shamisen manufacturing technique on film and photos, and published a pamphlet Fig 5 and papers. As the news of Tokyo Wagaki's crisis began to spread, first via social medias, and later in newspaper and on TV. Tokyo Wagaki's plight received social attention, and a widespread understanding began to form regarding the reality of shamisen manufacturing sites. In August 2020, a rock band called Wagaki Band, composed of musical instruments that include Japanese traditional instruments, held a fundraiser at its concert venue to seek support for Tokyo Wagaki. As the band is popular among young people, its plea to its fans to support the techniques for manufacturing to shamisen, which they themselves perform in their band, consequently spread news of the predicament of shamisen manufacturing to a wider generation of people and broadened the circle of support. Moreover, the sharing of the situation and broadening of the circle of support became a source not only of financial support but also emotional support to the shamisen manufacturer, which had never received much attention from society before. In this way, the dire situation of conservation techniques that are indispensable to traditional performing arts came to be widely known on account of COVID-19 in association with Tokyo Wagaki. Actually, however, it had been serious since even before COVID-19, and information about this had been disseminated. According to Fig 6 article, the production of shamisen and koto had already declined by roughly 81% and 85%, respectively, over the past 47 years, despite both being representative musical instruments of Japanese traditional performing arts. In other words, manufacturing site of musical instruments that support traditional performing arts had already been in a difficult situation, faced with a decline in demand since before COVID-19. Tokyo Wagaki ultimately faced a crisis of business closure after accumulation of such circumstances, and ironically, it is because word got out that its crisis was finally shared among society and support activities ensued. To continue manufacturing and supplying shamisen to traditional performing arts in the future, measures need to be taken to develop a self-standing environment. That is, it is necessary to expand demand for the musical instrument and to develop human and financial environments for its supply from a medium to long-term perspective. Within this kind of situation, the government came to formulate measures such as the system of selected conservation techniques for the protection of conservation techniques and the program for the dissemination and expansion of Japanese music. In Japan, the law for the protection of cultural properties provides for a system that selects traditional techniques or craftsmanship that are indispensable to the preservation of cultural properties and for which preservation measures need to be taken, and supports their transmission by certifying individual or organizations as holders of the techniques. Under this law, making of the shamisen neck and body and making of koto were certified by the government as selected conservation techniques in autumn 2021. The selection served as a public announcement that the shamisen manufacturing technique is indispensable to the transmission of traditional performing arts, and a national subsidy was granted for the transmission of the technique itself. The other measure is the program for the dissemination and expansion of Japanese music launched in 2021. This program has two characteristics. One is that it is intended for high school and university clubs and aims to expand the strata of young Japanese music enthusiasts and cultivate new demand. The subsidy may be used to borrow musical instruments such as the shamisen free of charge, repair and service instruments owned by the club, invite performers as instructors, hold and operate recitals, and participate in exchange meetings and workshops. The second characteristic is that it incorporates a system in which the government buys musical instruments from instrument manufacturers and lends them out to students free of charge. By doing so, the program promotes the musical activities of students who cannot obtain the necessary instrument and afford repair fees. It also aims to keep the flame of technical transmission burning by providing instrument manufacturers facing a dire situation with opportunities to manufacture instruments. I think this is an innovative program that allows young enthusiasts of traditional performing arts to engage in their activity in a better environment, and that simultaneously provide indirect support to musical instrument manufacturers facing a crisis amid COVID-19. Conclusion. Firstly, the pandemic helped us realize anew that Japanese traditional performing arts cannot exist only by the efforts of their performers. Even with one of Japan's leading shamisen manufacturers, their sense of crisis failed to be shared with performers, enthusiasts, researchers, and people engaged in the administration of cultural properties, until the possibilities of business closure loomed in front of their eyes. Moreover, it was also owing to COVID-19 that a widespread understanding began to form regarding the large impacts of the pandemic on conservation techniques, the long overlooked foundation of traditional performing arts. Secondly, COVID-19 continues to have an impact on traditional performing arts, but we now know that traditional performing arts can only continue to exist along with conservation techniques. Thus, we must apply the above two lessons and create a strong scheme that grasps, supports, and transmits traditional performing arts within a large framework that includes conservation techniques. It is only beyond that point that post-pandemic restoration can be truly achieved. Thank you for your attention. Welcome your comments, suggestions, and questions by email. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maihara Megumi, for the presentation. Our next presentation is entitled Museums and Living Heritage in Thailand, Innovation and Traditional Resources in the Face of the Pandemic. The paper will be presented by Dr. Parita Chalanpao Konantakul. She is a retired anthropologist, former director of the Princess Mahachakri Sirindon Anthropology Center in Bangkok, Thailand. Dr. Parita was a lecturer of anthropology at Thammasat University, Thailand from 1981 until 2002. From 2002 until 2010, she was the director of the Princess Mahachakri Sirindon Anthropology Center, where she initiated research and capacity building program for community-based museums all over Thailand. Her interests include dance, folk theater, art, and community museums. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Dr. Parita.
Thank you, Professor Hasnal Saiden, for your kind introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Department of National Heritage and collaborating agencies for organizing this conference. And I'm honored to have been invited to be part of it. Next slide, please. My presentation is twofold. First, I want to show that museums can have a very important role to play in transmitting the knowledge and skills of living heritage. And I'll do this by using two case studies of community museums in Thailand. And secondly, I want to show how these two museums coped with the pandemic challenges by using different strategies that are suitable for their specific social and economic context. Next, please. The type of museum I'll be talking about are called by different names. Sometimes they're called local museums or community museums or community-based museums. And there are quite a few of them in Thailand, maybe 300 to 400 such museums. Quite a lot of them are run by Buddhist monasteries. Some are run by schools or village organizations or private individuals. Not all of them are directly involved in living heritage, but some focus on revitalizing local intangible cultural heritage traditions. They also have active participation of community members who are practitioners or bearers of their local traditions. Next, please. The two museums I'll talk about, the first one is the Nang Yai, or Large Puppet Museum in the monastery of Kanon in central Thailand. And the other one is called the Playable Museum in the northern part of Thailand. The materials presented in this paper are from the program of the Sirinthorn Anthropology Center where I used to work. And I also made some field visits in May and September this year. Next, please. First, the Playable Museum. Let me introduce it to you. This is a private museum situated in a rural community. It was established in the year 2000 by a team of NGO workers who has family connection with the local community. Now, like many rural communities in Thailand, this village suffered from the impacts of urban migration. So within the village, only the elderly people, the grandpas and grandmas, and the young children are left. And there was a gap between these two age groups. And this is the main concern of the NGO. So after some consultation, they decided to promote activities of traditional folk toy making, as well as storytelling, as a means to bridge the generation gap and lead to the well-being of the community members. Next, please. So the museum, the Playable Museum, was established to serve as a space for transmitting the knowledge and skill of toy making and also of playing them. And in doing so, the children will learn the characteristics and values of handicrafts. And these values include exploring the characteristics of natural materials, using everyday household and common materials, learning basic mechanics of how things work, observing everyday human activities, and fostering imagination and creativity. And let me show you just one example. The picture on the left-hand side, this is the first toy that was made for the museum by the elderly craftsman. When he finished making it, he asked, "What do you think it is?" Well, there are several answers. It may be a dog, it may be a crocodile, a monitor lizard, or some mythical animal. The old man said that all the answers were correct because it is the players who give it an identity according to his or her own imagination. So playing this folk toy requires imagination and creativity. Next, please. Well, this is just some examples of the folk toys. The one on your right-hand side is the one that shows how craftsmen or toy maker need to know the characteristic or the nature of the natural material that they work with. But to play with this toy, you need to squeeze the bamboo frame at the bottom. And by squeezing it, the figure on the top will do some kind of acrobatic movements. But this bamboo is not any bamboo. It's a special kind of bamboo that grows in the forest, and it is strong and pliable. And you have to find the right kind of bamboo in order to be able to make this toy. Next, please. And this is just more examples of the folk toys. Some are made by using old coins, and some made from coconut shell. Next, please. Now, as we know, living heritage is constantly changing. So the knowledge and skill of folk toy making at the museum have also been developed and recreated. One corner of the museum is turned into quite a modern maker space filled with traditional and modern tools for children to invent their own toys. But at the same time, they have to keep the core values of being environmental friendly and use creativity and imagination. Next, please. So the museum offers a range of activities, mainly workshops for children in the local community as well as in other communities. They also work with school teachers and education agencies in order to encourage them to include toys and toy making in school classrooms. Next, please. Community members actively participate in many capacities. Some of them are resource persons, trainers, workshop facilitators. Some of them are museum assistants, and quite a lot of them are suppliers for museum shops. They have a range of wooden toys that are produced in the community. Next, please. Now, this is a private museum run by one person and his family, but with the collaboration of the community members. The income of the museum comes from organizing workshops for schools, and sometimes they can secure grants from various government agencies or private sectors. But the grants is quite complex to secure, and they don't come regularly. So during the pandemic, 2019 to 21, the museum lost visitors and revenues from workshops. So facing the economic challenges, they have to adapt their plan, revise their plan, and then make use of online technology by developing a box set of wooden toys comprising 6 groups of toys as shown in the picture. Some of them are animals, some propeller, top spins, or coconut shell creatures. Next, please. And in addition to selling the box sets online, the museum offered online workshops introducing the folk toys and showing buyers how to play with them, various creative ways to play with these toys. The toy sets were well received. They had a lot of orders, and they also received some orders from education agencies and some health foundations. Next, please. Well, online channel has become an important mode for the museums to promote folk toys, as well as other handicrafts such as embroidery, knitting, crocheting, and weaving. They make a small weaving loom for children to weave at home. So to summarize, their strategy, the strategy adopted by the Playable Museum is to be innovative and explore the social media and online platform, which is suitable for their customers who are children and their parents. Next, please. Now, I'd like to move to a different setting, and this is the Puppet Museum in one monastery in central Thailand. This kind of performance, known in Thai as Nang Yai, is a type of shadow play that use very large puppets made from cow hide, which is carved into figures depicting characters from the Ramayana or Ramakien in Thai. And performance takes place at night. Next, please. The puppets are held and moved by dancers against a white screen, as you can see in the picture. And there will be a spotlight or a bonfire made from burning coconut shells placed behind the screen. Next, please. Now, the shadow play tradition is several hundred years old. It was, and still is to a large extent, a ritual performance that accompanied cremation ceremonies of royalties or highly respected monks. The tradition was first mentioned in the 15th century, but then some 80 to 100 years ago, it went into decline. But the actual puppets were kept in many monasteries, and the knowledge and skill continued to be transmitted, but within the family circles mainly, and performances were rare. Next, please. At this particular monastery, or Wat Kanon, they have some 500 puppets, large puppets. These puppets are believed to be over 100 years old. Some collectors try to buy them, but the monks and community members refuse to sell them, saying that they were objects of their heritage that define who they are, and they would not part with them. And around 1970s, a project was initiated by the monastery, the community, and various government agencies and the academics to revitalize the tradition by establishing a museum of puppets together with establishment of a new puppet troupe, which will enable the transmission of the knowledge and skill to the next generation. Next one, please. So with the strong support from various agencies outside, and together with the current abbot, who is the local person and who learned the art of puppetry when he was young. So puppet troupe was, puppet performance was close to his heart. So together they form a new troupe. And today performances take place every weekend for visitors. And the troupe is also commissioned to perform in many events by government or the private sectors. Next, please. So this is taken from one of their performances. Next, please. So the museum and the troupe have become a learning center for the Nang Yai tradition. It creates awareness among the local youth and the wider public about the aesthetic and cultural value of large puppet performances. The troupe is managed by the monastery, and the abbot is the focal point of activity. He has devised a system of sharing economic benefits to the performers by paying fees to the principal performers. And for the supporting performers, they will get fees when they perform each time. The salaries for principal performers are not high, but enough to retain them with the monastery troupe. Next, please. So how did they cope during the pandemic? Well, during the COVID lockdown, the theater was closed, the weekend shows stopped, but the museums remained open as well as the monastery. Salaries paid to performers were still paid, but drastically reduced. So where did the resources come from? The troupe relied mainly on the resources of the monasteries. The monastery is a traditional local institution, and they get donations in kind and cash from the community members and some visitors. And during the COVID period, the monastery functioned as a center for distributing relief goods for the community. So it has resources that the performers could tap upon if necessary. So reliance on traditional monastic resources is the main strategy for the troupe to survive, and the core performers remain with the monastery and the troupe during the pandemic time. Next, please. Resilience is another quality that sees the troupe through difficult times. Whenever there was an opportunity to perform, they would take it, even if it means that they had to adapt the art to fit the requirement of the employer. For example, they were commissioned to perform a short show to promote health measures to cope with the COVID infection, such as wearing masks or how to stay safe or what to do when one is infected. So they could adapt part of the Ramayana episode in order to put across these health messages. Next. Now that the pandemic is less threatening, the troupe bounced back to become active again. The regular weekend shows have started, and recently they have participated in the Phetbury Harmony World Shadow Puppet Festival 2022 in September 2022. Next, please. The objectives of this festival were to exchange knowledge and experience among different genres of the art of puppetry and to raise awareness among the general public about this rich heritage of Thailand and other places. Next, please. The event promoted much interest among the youth who participate in learning how to make puppets and how to manipulate puppets. And some even joined the Wai Crew or the ritual to honor the sacred teachers, which is a kind of initiation ceremony for admitting new apprentices to the tradition. Next, please. So to sum up, I mean, well, it is very hard to generalize, but I hope we can learn something from these two examples, which are quite inspiring. I think the first thing we can say is that the strength of these two community museums is within their grassroots nature. They are community-based, initiated and run by community members. They're not commercial institutions. Their mission is to safeguard their local traditions, to create pride, identity, and well-being of their communities. So in time of crisis, such as the pandemic crisis, they understand the potentials of their living traditions and were able to devise different means, be it online technology or traditional monastic religious resources, to survive and continue the transmission. So following from this, what we can say is that state policy, or at least part of the state policy during the post-COVID era, should be to empower grassroots organizations such as these museums to be able to work independently, to make their own decision so that they can adapt and adopt the diversity of measures befitting their different ecosystems to deal with the crisis as they did during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, please. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to respond to any comment or question. And thank you very much to the Secretariat for helping screening the slide. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Dr. Parita, thank you very much for the presentation. I learned a lot from it because I'm actually directing a museum as well. Personally, I would like to ask questions, but I think I have to wait later after the conference. I have to follow the protocol as instructed. But thank you very much. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is entitled Safeguarding Icich in a Pandemic, Lessons and Experiences from Singapore. Will be presented by Mr. Nicholas Yeo. He is a Senior Manager, Heritage Research and Assessment Department of the National Heritage Board, Singapore. Mr. Nicholas Yeo is currently a Senior Manager at the Heritage Research and Assessment Department of the National Heritage Board, Singapore. He is involved in developing programs to raise awareness of Singapore's intangible cultural heritage, alongside initiatives to help safeguard heritage businesses in Singapore. Nicholas has over 12 years of experience in the cultural heritage sector and has worked in various fields, including marketing and communications and digital engagement. Nicholas also enjoys documenting both the built and intangible heritage of Singapore through photos. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Mr. Nicholas Yeo.
Thank you so much, Professor Hasnu, and very good evening to everyone. I'm very happy to be invited for this conference alongside a very distinguished set of speakers. So yes, without further ado, let me start a bit more about my presentation about safeguarding Icich in a pandemic and the lessons and experience we took here over here in Singapore. Yeah. See this now? Okay. Am I good?
Okay, you're good.
Okay, Ken. Thanks so much. Sorry for the technical error. Yes, but back to my presentation. Singapore is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. In fact, we have 5.6 million people on an island that's probably much smaller than where most of you live. But despite that, Singapore is actually home to a wide variety of Icich practices, as you can see in these photos here. If you walk along a street in Singapore, it's not rare to find a Muslim a mosque, a Hindu temple, and even a Buddhist or Taoist temple on the same street. Many of us also have friends and families, even spouses who are different ethnicities and religions. And because we are so small, we also get the chance to see many of the Icich practices taking place. As you can see in the bottom three images here, that is a prayer session at the Hindu temple. The center one is a 9 Emperor Gods festival practiced by the Taoists in Singapore. And of course, you have Malay weddings as well by a good Malay Muslim community here in Singapore as well. Like many of you, we've all been through the whole COVID situation as well, but I just thought I'd kind of explain what took place in Singapore during the past 2 years and something that's still going on as well. So for about just over 2 years, we had many forms of safe distancing restrictions before most of them were actually lifted just about 3 or 4 months ago. One of the most key one was actually something called the circuit breaker from the 7th April to the 1st of June in 2020, where I think many of you are familiar as well. Social gatherings such as the dining out, public entertainment events, and even visiting of homes were not allowed here in Singapore. This really impacted a lot of the Icich communities, including heritage businesses, performing arts groups, and of course Singaporeans who actually take part in many of the social festivals and practices that we have in Singapore as well. Yeah, as you can see, just sharing some other photos as well. Cultural precincts like in Chinatown on the far right became almost ghost towns because tourists and even people like myself, we couldn't come out of our homes. Concerts as well. Usually we'll get a full house for such events. They are a lot more scattered and a lot fewer attendees as well. And besides this, it was only very recently that activities such as Thai Pusam, Vesak Day, and even Hari Raya Puasa, where people could actually attend them physically. Most of the times, as you can see in the largest image here, we had to do them virtually as well. And this is something that I think I'll expound a bit more in my later presentation. Yeah, so when COVID hit as well, I mean, it was very much an unprecedented event that many of us were not prepared for. Despite this, I think what we can have seen, as you've seen the latest slides, is that the community really has shown great resilience in persevering and adapting their Icich practices throughout the pandemic. Aside from this, it was also very essential that for my company, the organization, which is the National Heritage Board that kind of governs and oversees the museum and heritage landscape in Singapore, that we support and work together with the Icich businesses and communities to actually help safeguard them for future generations. This was done through a wide variety of things, including research and engagement efforts to understand the challenges faced, and most importantly, to help develop long-term initiatives that will help safeguard Icich for future generations. So one of the key stakeholders that we actually engage with, of course, heritage businesses. These are the people that are providing products and services on a daily basis to Singaporeans and tourists alike. And in Singapore's urban economic environment, they face many unique challenges that are unique to Singapore as well. I'd like to share about three examples here. The first on the left being Chuan Ji Bakery. It's a confectionery shop with a 100-year-old recipe of Hainanese mooncakes. Like many F&B establishments, the dining-in restrictions, things like the delivery costs and importing of goods, and even the shortage of manpower because more foreign workers couldn't come into Singapore as well, actually led to many challenges for them in operating their business. The second one that you see in the center is Jamal Kazura Aromatics. They are a century-old perfumery shop in the historic district of Kampong Glam. They actually shared with us there are a lot of supply chain issues which many businesses face as well. And on top of that, a sharp drop in visitors, both domestically and internationally, meant that there were a lot fewer customers and fewer sales of their products as well. Other companies like Setian Heng Buddha Shop, led by their new fourth generation owner, Zhi Yong, actually came up with very interesting tours and programs that encouraged in-person attendance. Unfortunately, this took place just as the pandemic hit, and they had to actually step back and stop a lot of the progress that they actually made with their business as well. Because of this, we actually proceeded to conduct a survey with stakeholders just a few months after the circuit breaker. And one of the key questions that we asked them was that what are their key concerns as we go past the circuit breaker period. And as you can see from the survey results over here, the key concern that they raised was the ability to attract audiences or customers back, followed by the postponement or cancellation of projects, which I think a lot of them found it very hard to recoup their losses as well. And then lastly, also about the financial resources. Like any metropolitan city, things like rental and manpower in Singapore are really high. And this definitely puts a strain if things like visitors and the sales drop quite significantly as well. Moving on, we asked them quite a number of questions, but I was just highlighting a few of them here. We asked them how long will it take to actually recover from the impact of COVID-19. Bearing in mind this was done back almost over 2 years ago, so things might have evolved from there. But based on this data, you can actually see that most people felt that 6 months would almost be the bare minimum that they would require. But the most heavy one of which would actually be requiring more than a year to actually recover from the impact of COVID-19 as well. So with that in mind, we actually, one of the things that the National Heritage Board of Singapore developed was this grant called the Organisation Transformation Grant. This grant actually helps support heritage businesses and organizations with up to $40,000 to develop new projects and initiatives on a co-funding model. What we wanted to achieve from this grant was to encourage them to conceive and implement new ideas, and also review existing ways to make the business relevant and or efficient as well. I think we're happy to say that since this was done last year, we have managed to support 15 projects that range from digital adoption, new product lines, and also diversification of their heritage business model as well. One example of an applicant who actually took up the grant is Satan Heng Buddha Shop. They're actually in the business of making Chinese effigies that you see in home altars or even temples, and they've been doing them for over a century. So what actually their project tried to overcome was that the issue that a lot of these effigies, they take weeks, even months to complete as well. The problem is that once they were sold, there was no record of it. There were only rough sketches, or even all the ideas might be inside their head as well. So what they did through the grant was that they actually adopted the use of 3D scanning technology to help create a database of sketches and 3D references for future use. Another thing that was very interesting about this technology is that they could actually use them to be input into a machine cover that could actually create the base of an effigy within a few hours instead of a few weeks that it will actually take for the craftsman to make it. I think also we did ask them the question, I was like, oh, how does this kind of derail you away from the traditional methods of making an effigy? But they assured us that some of the important things such as the threading, or there's this thing called the opening of the deity's eyes. A lot of these they assured us that it was still done by hand to actually retain the Icich value and importance of the craft of Chinese effigies. Moving past the grant, I think we are very glad to see that the community also came together on their own to help kind of preserve and also safeguard certain aspects of ICH in Singapore. One thing that's very dear to Singapore, and I'm sure many of you as well, is that of hawker culture, which was actually inscribed to the UNESCO representative list back in December 2020. So like I mentioned previously, dining-in restrictions were a very big thing in Singapore, and to help combat this, a fully ground-up Facebook group called Hawkers United, Tapao 2020, was actually started. So the word Tapao, for those who are not familiar, it's actually a colloquial term to describe takeaway, the process of takeaways in Singapore. So the interesting thing about this was that, as with any Facebook group, it was actually a two-way platform for hawkers to not only promote their stalls and the food they serve, but also for customers to help promote their favorite hawker food as well. And so I think even for me myself, I got to know many hawker stalls and hawker dishes I've never tried before, and actually went down to patronize some of them thanks to Facebook groups like this as well. So I think we're happy to say that even till today, it is something that's still going very strong, and there are over 300,000 members on this platform as well. So that's something very, very amazing that we realize as well from the community efforts. And this has actually spurred on and actually led to not just also led many private companies and individuals to support the hawkers as well. So for example, in this news article you see on the left, the DBS, which is Singapore's largest bank, actually worked with 7 hawker centers to put them on a scheme to help boost income of the hawkers hit by the pandemic. Something that is more kind of personal as well was that their Instagram pages started out by a collection of individuals. There was this one in particular called Where to Tapao, where, I think the issue of technology is something that some of the elderly hawkers in Singapore are not aware of. So what they did was actually they created this Instagram account to feature hawkers that could not go onto platforms like Hawkers United Taobao as well. This kind of ensured that some of them will be a bit more visible and enjoy business from members from the digital community as well. Another instance of where NHB worked together with the community was a campaign known as Ramadan Together. So just to share that just over 15% of Singaporeans are Muslims, of which the month of Ramadan is one of the most important Icich practices to the community. For those of you who partake in it, you will know that social gatherings are a very crucial part of Ramadan, and particularly the practice of iftar or the breaking of fast, where family and friends gather together for it, as well as for Hari Raya Puasa. So what we did together was that in May 2020, just when this right in the middle of circuit breaker where all social activities were banned, we worked together with members of the Muslim community to actually create programs during the month of Ramadan, albeit on a digital platform. This was very much a first for us. I think digital programs was something that everyone was getting used to at that point of time. And it centered around key activities associated with Ramadan, such as iftar, the breaking of fast, even something called Masak Together, where we actually did cooking programs for people to learn how to create their own iftar meals. And then the great thing about this was that by going digital, we were able to target both Muslims and non-Muslims alike to actually share about the practices of other communities. Beyond this as well, these are not just initiatives by us, but a lot of the social practices such as Pisak Day turned to platforms like we're using here on Zoom to actually conduct their Icich activities. And through our Singapore Heritage Festival, we also did multiple tours and even cooking demonstrations for people to enjoy in the comforts of their home. And I think many of this has also accelerated the use of technology, such as the use of augmented reality or virtual reality, as you can see in this traditional puppetry performance by the National Arts Council Singapore. So with that in mind, actually, I come to the end of the slide. And I think what we learned from all these engagements, these kind of programs that we did was that COVID has definitely fundamentally changed the way of life, including those of Icich communities and their practices. In some surveys that we've done recently, there are people who say that, no, actually digital is fine. I might not want to go back to some physical things, but there are a large majority of people that also still treasure and appreciate some of the social practices and engagements that we have with the community. For example, earlier this week was actually Deepavali. And so even myself, it was the first time I managed to gather with some of my in-laws as well to actually partake in the Deepavali celebration. So that's something that I very much welcome as well. And I think what we're very proud of seeing over these few years is that the resilience very much of the community to adapt and embrace the digital while still emphasizing the importance of the physical connections as well. Moving forward, this exercise, these past few years has also made NHB more assured to place a greater emphasis and resources to help safeguard Icich in Singapore, such as through the working together with heritage businesses. And it's crucial more than ever that everyone, whether is it you as an individual, communities, NGOs, and the government as well, work together to safeguard Icich for future generations. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your time in listening to me, and happy to take any questions that you might have. Thanks very much to the Secretariat once again for the honor of having me here at this conference.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas Yeo, for the interesting presentation. I think we have learned a lot from some of the strategies used by the National Heritage Board of Singapore, maybe some of which we can sort of adopt at home here in Malaysia. So to counter that, to supplement that, to complement that, we have a Malaysian story. The next paper, the final paper, is entitled Efforts to Safeguard Intangible Cultural Heritage in Malaysia, during and also after the or post pandemic. This paper is going to be presented by Mr. Muhammad Shahrin Abdullah. Mr. Muhammad Shahrin Abdullah is the current Director of World Heritage Division, Department of National Heritage, Ministry of Tourism and Culture, Malaysia. His education in 2000, Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology and Anthropology with honors, minoring in Islamic Revealed Knowledge from the International Islamic University, Gombak, Selangor. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Mr. Muhammad Shahrin Abdullah. Dipersilakan dengan segala hormatnya.
Thank you, Professor Hasnul, for being a moderator today. Okay, actually, before I go further, before I present to you all about the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage during the post-COVID-19, during the COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 in Malaysia, I think let me explain about the protection or the safeguarding of heritage in Malaysia. Okay. In general protection. Wait, what happened to the slide? Wait, what happened to the slide? I tried to control the slide. Okay. Okay, as of now, actually, we have National Heritage Act 2005 or Act 645. And actually, under the Act, we can see here about the classification or concept of heritage can be divided into these categories, as you can see from the slide here. Okay, and then of course, in general, it can be divided into two, first natural and then cultural, and the other one is cultural. And then under the culture, we have tangible and intangible cultural heritage, where the intangible cultural heritage also we have the what we call the most prominent concept that been used for this concept is actually the knowledge about the heritage itself. Okay, and then also the transmission of knowledge, and of course it involves the community and of course the stakeholder as well. And okay, this is about the National Heritage Act. Actually, this the Act is actually to provide the conservation and preservation of national heritage, tangible, intangible, underwater cultural heritage, treasure trove, and for other related matters. And the Act actually came into effect on the 1st March 2006, and it repealed the previous Act, the Antiquities Act 1976, and also the Treasure Trove Act 1957. Actually, both acts have limitation in terms of the protection of the heritage that we have, and actually, of course, the introduction or the formulation of a new act, the National Heritage Act, will cover a wider spectrum of heritage in terms of the protection or the safeguarding. Okay, as I mentioned to you just now, that the existence of the Heritage Act 2005 therefore repealed the previous Act, Antiquities and also the Treasure Trove Act. And actually, the Antiquities Act, it was what we call the Secretariat was under the Department of Museum and Antiquities previously, and actually this Act, it only covers all intangible cultural heritage aspect, and also there is no provision about the intangible cultural heritage, and also no living treasures and underwater cultural heritage being protected under this Act. So that's why we need to have more comprehensive act to protect our heritage in wider perspective of coverage. Okay, and also about the treasure trove also. Even though it's been repealed by the National Heritage Act, but still the state government can still still adapting the act for their state level, and we have no problem, because we have put the provision of most of the provision under this Treasure Trove Act under the National Heritage Act 2005. Okay. Oh wait. Okay. Therefore, the National Heritage Act 2005 is the most comprehensive legal instrument to protect and to preserve wide spectrum of heritage that include tangible, intangible, and others. And as I mentioned to you before. Okay, and also the Act provides heritage properties management mechanisms such as enforcement, funding, and recognition of the practitioners. And when we talk about the mechanism under the National Heritage Act 2005, we have what we call considered as considered new for the new new era or new concept or principle of protecting heritage, because we have specifically introduced the special mechanisms, such the first one is Commissioner of Heritage, and second is a National Heritage Council. Actually, the National Heritage Council consists of the experts and also the government officials, senior government officials, where they they have what we call wide experience in terms of heritage, and of course their expertise and also their experience needed to help the government, the Department of National Heritage and also the Commissioner of Heritage to ensure about to support or to give advice about the protection or the safeguarding of heritage throughout the country. And the third mechanism that we have is a National Heritage Register. And this National Heritage Register, we have a few category of heritage. We have two categories of heritage. I will mention to you after this. For the following slide, the following slide. And the third one, of course, the Heritage Fund. Heritage Fund's been established under this Heritage Act, and there's no such fund that been introduced under the previous act, the Antiquities Act. So we have a better protection, and also we have a special mechanisms that good. The best. Situation for heritage in terms of safeguarding and the protection for future generation to be inherited by a future generation as well. Okay. The establishment of the National Heritage Department. Actually, the department was established concurrently with the enforcement of the Act. Since 2000 on the 1st March 2006, and it is headed by the Commissioner of Heritage. And this okay. Okay, and then actually this is the establishment of the Department of National Heritage. The function of the department. Basically the function of the department is based on the function of the Commissioner of Heritage as related under the National Heritage Act 2005. Among them, research on Icich, archaeological research, building conservation, monitoring heritage sites, registering heritage items, publishing heritage materials, activities related to UNESCO, awareness program, etc. And then for the activities related to UNESCO, it includes the international affairs of with UNESCO, with other parties as well. Including the advisory body of UNESCO, and also the nomination process of the heritage or that been nominated, and then also to monitor the condition or the heritage that we have, and especially the heritage that been that have received the recognition from UNESCO, and including the sites, intangible cultural heritage. We have Mak Yong, Donang Sayang, Pantun, and etc. And then also we have from time to time we have to conduct or organize awareness programs to keep heritage alive among the citizens of Malaysia. And of course, we have many programs throughout the year, so we keep maintaining this program and activities from time to time, and we try to get as much as possible in terms of the participant from even from the younger generation. Okay, this is the function of the commissioner. I think you have seen some of them. Of course, to determine the destination of the site, to register objects underwater, and to establish and maintain the register, and to determine and specify the set categories of heritage to be listed under the register, to supervise about the conservation, maintenance, promotion, and exhibition of, and also the accessibility of heritage, and to promote and facilitate any research relating to heritage, to authorize, monitor, and supervise excavation for the heritage purposes. Okay, this is for archaeological site. Okay, this is almost the same that I mentioned before. Okay, to organize, and then actually we have, I mean, the commissioner itself have to advise and coordinate with the local planning authority from time to time about the new development, especially. And we have a special committee dealing with this and to discuss about the HIA or the proposed project that been sent to us from the state government or the PBT or the, I mean, the local authority. From time to time, we will evaluate and to give advice, and we'll give advice about the proper ways, how to develop and also to conserve the heritage site or buildings, especially, and then also to regulate best standard and practices of conservation, to advise minister about any method in respect to conservation and preservation of heritage, and also under this function. All related to heritage also be need to be given the advice. So the commissioner of heritage will take this, it will take charge about all matters to in terms of ensuring the heritage is well protected and well conserved for next generation. Okay, this is the state of heritage according to the Act, I mean the National Heritage Act 2005, where it can be divided into two: heritage, gazetted by the Commissioner of Heritage under Section 24, Act 645, and then we have national heritage proclaimed by the Minister under Section 67. This under the Section 67 also, the criteria has been established and been mentioned under the section. And if we go to the heritage sites in Malaysia, we can see the two different plaques. With, I mean, with different colors, and also the the words mentioning about the status of heritage. Also, we have if let's say for the black color for national heritage, and for heritage is with dark red color. For heritage. Okay. Okay, this is the Declaration of Heritage. I mean, the criteria that been used before the heritage can be considered to be national heritage or to be declared as national heritage. At least it must fulfill one criteria out of the 9 criteria mentioned here. So among them, the historical importance, and which is associated with the relationship to Malaysia, good design or aesthetic characteristic, scientific or technical innovation or achievement, the social or cultural association, potential to educate, and important exhibiting the richness, diversity, unusual integration of features, the rarity or uniqueness of national heritage, natural heritage, tangible or intangible heritage, the representative nature of site, and many other. And actually, of course, when we do the evaluation for each heritage of each items or each elements to be inscribed under this National Heritage Act, we have to look into the significance of the heritage itself, depending on the condition, and also we have to evaluate in terms of the integrity and also the authenticity of the heritage as well. But depending on the classification of or type of heritage, like normally for the natural heritage and also the intangible cultural heritage, there's no concept of authenticity. So of course, depending on the type of heritage itself. Okay. 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. Actually, we have ratified this convention in 2013. Yes, 2013. As we know that the convention has already entered into force in 2006, and it is one of the seven UNESCO Convention of Culture. And this, of course, the primary goals for the convention to safeguard intangible cultural heritage, to ensure respect for the intangible cultural heritage for groups and individual concerns, to raise awareness about the appreciation of the importance of the cultural heritage at local, national, and international level, and also to provide for international cooperation and assistance. And actually, we have, it can be, I mean, we can understand that the protection of heritage in Malaysia consists of the legal instrument at national level, and also at international level we have Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention that we have signed, or we are the member of the convention since 2013, and of course we have certain responsibility that need to be fulfilled and as been spelled out under the convention. Okay. Okay, this in term of the term of intangible cultural heritage as stipulated under the convention, where the term of intangible cultural heritage is defined as the practices, representation, expression of knowledge and skills, and also the instrument or object and artifacts that are associated, which is associated with the ICH itself, and also the communities, groups, and in some cases individuals as a part of their cultural heritage. So here you can see that I mean the communities also be mentioned as one of the elements that under this that need to be emphasized as well. And I'll discuss further about the communities' role and then the importance of communities under the SCH in the following slide. Okay, and also the domain, of course, I think most of you already know about the domain that been covered under the convention. Of course, some of them is oral, tradition, expression, performing arts, ritual, festive event, knowledge, and practices concerning the universe and our world and the universe, and also the traditional craftsmanship. Okay. Okay, this is among the Malaysia's elements that already been listed under the Icich Convention, and we have Mak Yong in 2005. It was listed in 2005, and then Mak Yong during that time was proclaimed as a masterpiece of oral and intangible cultural heritage, and after that in 2008 it became automatically converted into representative list following the provision under the convention. And we have Dondang Sayang. We have ratified the convention in 2013, and after that we are quite active in terms of nominating our heritage elements. I mean the intangible cultural heritage elements under this convention. We have Dondang Sayang in 2018, and then after that we have Silat in 2019, and we have Pantun and Wangkang in 2020. And the latest one we have Songket in 2021. Okay, of course both Pantun and Wangkang and also Songket was during the MCO situation in Malaysia. And okay, these are the community of the intangible cultural heritage as stimulated or that mentioning under the convention, where the communities and groups of traditional brothers participation for the safeguarding of ICH, where their role as included in the definition provided under the Article 2.1. And then, of course, under the convention as well, Articles 11, 12, 13, where the role of the state parties to take necessary measures in ensuring the safeguarding of ICH, and also to include communities, groups, and relevant NGOs India for the participation of the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. And therefore we can understand that the community is the main actor for the safeguarding of ICH. We have to accept the fact that community is need to be given high, what we call highest priority in whatever action or the program that we are going to organize. So we have to consider the participation of the community for all programs that we plan for that actually. Okay, the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage during and post COVID-19 pandemic in Malaysia, and of course during the pandemic or during the MCO, managing economic was very challenging, where it changed people's life throughout the world, including Malaysia. And of course, it's new condition and new way of life, and it's been difficult for us, especially not only the general public, but also the community itself. And basically, there are two approaches taken by the Malaysian government. First, to stop the COVID-19 epidemic from continuing spreading with the country, either from outside or within the country, and also to ensure that the people's economy is not affected due to the COVID-19 epidemic. And of course, people's economy also involving the community or the practitioner of intangible cultural heritage. Okay. When we talk about the people's economy, also regarding the community of Icich, we have to consider in few areas of course, the priority that need to given about for their continuity of life. And of course, because of the limitation of the movement, and they cannot go out to work, and of course they lost their income. And normally, actually, it involves the program or activities that the face-to-face activity or direct contact with the audience. So now the condition, during that time, during the MCO, they cannot go to perform with direct interaction or face-to-face for the cultural performance. So we have to find the best way or the best solution to ensure that the community for Icich to continue, to allow them to survive. And we have to find the right way, actually, how to help them in terms of for their source of income. And also, of course, indirectly, it will lead to the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage in terms of the practicing and also continuing of transmitting of knowledge from time to time in order to ensure that the intangible cultural heritage will not be lost or well safeguarded in terms of the transmission of knowledge to other people as well. Okay, among the challenges during the MCO, of course, to maintain the survival of the practitioners, and this, the survival of practitioners that I mentioned to you just now about the survival in terms of economic income, their income. So we have to find the right way how to maintain their life, and also to ensure that they can still survive for their life. And then also about the continuation of safeguarding activity through teaching and training, the transmission of knowledge. So we cannot stop the process of transmission of knowledge from time to time. And then also the third challenge is about the adapting new ways in implementing of program activities, and of course with the new regulation or rules where we cannot have direct interaction or face-to-face activities. And the fourth one is about reprogramming of budget and for culture and programs, because there is uncertainty. And actually we have planned, the program that were planned before about the face-to-face interaction, or the direct contact. But anyway, we have to reprogram, and then depending on the condition, and there is, during the MCO, there's no, it was uncertain about the condition whether it can, it will be normalized within a few months or a few years. The future, we don't know. So that's why a bit difficult and a bit challenges for us to handle this condition. Okay, this is among the aid or the help from the government. Of course, it involves all sectors or the citizens of Malaysia, where deferment of the payment and also the including the income tax installment. And also we can see here about the fund also been exempted for the travel related companies, hotels, also about the service tax between March and August 2020. And also we have the government, the federal government have allocated the special relief facilities worth 2 billion, for all small enterprises to defer monthly installment payment of income from 1st April 2020 and to up to 30th June. And also they have introduced the second phase of the moratorium as well. And also allocation of 130 million to help the state government to cope with the COVID-19 crisis. And also most of the people, the Malaysian citizen, of course, they have EPF or Employer Provident Funds, where up to 12 million EPF members have withdrawn their fund, their money, and it costs, with the total amount of up to 40 billion. And then also the government also, they have introduced the moratorium, the deferment of loan payments, as I mentioned to you just now. Okay, this is the cultural special budget for the culture committee, and most of the, this budget actually, the initiative, the first initiative was about the special budget allocation, where up to 2.21 million has been allocated for 217 NGOs in 2020, and to support about the heritage industry. And also this support was done through Cendana, including the matching grant, and also in terms of financing facilities and financial assistance to art and cultural community as well. And also because of the condition where the NGOs cannot, the limitation of the program and activities, and also the economic activities, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Malaysia had organized the engagement session from time to time to restore the cultural NGOs organization, to make them alive, and then also to plan for future, after the recovery from the COVID-19. And then also the third one is about the establishment of online marketing platform to help the community as well, where people can, the community can market the craft, textile, ceramics, and etc. And also the MOTEC also have introduced online courses for tourist guide, and these to help the tourist guide in developing marketing strategy and to plan for post-pandemic. Okay, this is one, about the program that have been implemented by the Department of National Heritage in general. We have a few programs then, and of course the first one is about the sharing of knowledge and information about heritage, and this program we call it one day in one heritage, where from every day we will have a short sharing knowledge session. And we have to, we invited all the, the division under Department of National Heritage to share about heritage, and also including the Committee of Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. And then we have ICH webinar series, which, covering a variety of topics of ICH. And of course, it involves the expert and the community's practitioner to share about their expertise about culture and heritage. And also we have competitions relating to heritage program activities, where it involves the participation from the public, and of course to provide exposure to heritage as well. And we have published an e-book and e-journal to encourage the public and to continue to encourage the public. And also, of course, we invite the academician to contribute their work during the pandemic. Of course, it involves payment or the expert fees, at least to ensure that they can, for their survival during the MCO, and also to enhancing the capacity building using the online platform. We have a few workshops about the intangible cultural heritage as well. Okay, this is about the access to cultural heritage during the MCO. We have few cultural platforms, especially under the Department of National Heritage, and then also we have Department of Arts and Culture Heritage Malaysia, Department of National Archives, and also Georgetown Heritage. Okay, this is just to name a few. And under this official website, we can get, we can access our culture, product, and also all information about our heritage, including the intangible cultural heritage as well. So at least people can get connected with the intangible cultural heritage as well. Okay, this is under National Library. We have a U Library where they have provided 13.2 million digital reading materials, including the intangible cultural heritage material as well. Okay. Okay, this is after, the post-pandemic condition where the situation has now stabilized as of October 2022. And since mid of 2021, Malaysia have moved its economy towards normal condition, and the COVID-19 pandemic is no longer the main concern by the citizen. And Malaysia have also opened its border to the foreign visitors, where by opening the site for foreign visitors, of course, it can help indirectly. We can help the communities of intangible cultural heritage to perform and also to get payment and also for their survival as well. And also the Malaysian government had provided a number of support, including the cultural communities. And as of October 2022, activities and programs have been implemented, including face-to-face interaction without any problem, and budget allocation to implement first program also been normalized when almost all the planned activities have been successfully.
Mohon maaf ya, Encik Muhammad
Okay.
Syahrin.
Yes.
Mohon conclude pembentangannya, mohon maaf ya.
Okay, of course. Sorry, thank you. Okay, in short, the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage continue even during the MCO time, and tourism activities involving face-to-face interaction, cultural promotion and training contribute to the safeguarding of the heritage also now become normalized. And the government of Malaysia through its agency have introduced materials of loan, payment and premises rental, where it can help indirectly to all the communities, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee, and also, of course, in terms of special allocation was provided for the intangible communities through the implementation of program and activities. I think that's all from me. Sorry for the time. Okay, now let me. I would like to have to give it the floor to Professor Hasnul for the conclusion for this session. Okay, thank you.
Okay, terima kasih banyak-banyak Mr. Syahrin. That presentation marks the end of today's session. Before that, allow me to take a few minutes of your time to provide a brief summary of today's session. Dr. Patricia surveys rather gloomy challenges as well as opportunities surrounding Makyong performance in Kelantan before, during, and also after the pandemic. She mentions about the dynamics between the state, especially the political and religious establishments, with the practitioners, their families, and their immediate communities, especially the younger generation. She also mentioned about few potential opportunities, including Adiguru Cendana funding program for practitioner and immediate family, as well as community, food program, and also book publication for dissemination of knowledge and awareness. Ms. Jing Yong Seo presents the results of UNESCO survey on the impact of COVID pandemic towards Icich, including some recommendations. Few actions were taken, including focusing on information sharing and networking by bringing living heritage to classroom, especially focusing on the relationship between living heritage and sustainable development. She also mentioned about the importance of ICH education and the importance of the involvement of universities, professionals in schools as well as school children around all over Asia Pacific. Ms. Maihara Megumi shares several conservation efforts in regards to the Japanese traditional performing arts, specifically Tokyo Wagaki. Tokyo Wagaki faced business closure, and there is a need for self-sustaining, or what she mentioned, self-sustaining environment that includes dissemination and expansion of the use of the traditional musical instruments, especially in high schools and university clubs. Dr. Parita shares how museums cope with the pandemic by using two case studies, focusing on innovation and traditional resources. The two museums are Nang Yai Museum and Playable Museums. She mentions about some innovation, especially in the use of storytelling, folk toy making and playing, focusing on also the well-being of the community, especially in transmitting values or transferring values. The use of marker space, which I found very interesting, and also running workshop involving community members, training resource persons, or trainers. There is also a mention about leveraging or the use of online technology, developing box folk toys for sale, supplemented by online workshops on folk toys, making folk toys, embroidery, and weaving. She mentioned about the importance of innovation by leveraging or using social media and online technology. Also, the importance of grassroots communal support. Mr. Nicholas Yeo presents a Singapore story on safeguarding ICH during the pandemic. He used the word resilience and preservation, especially among the communities involved. The term community has been used throughout all the 6 presentations. Also, the support of the National Heritage Board in terms of conducting research and engagement on ICH, focusing on ICH-related business in urban economic environment or setting in Singapore. He shared a survey, especially on the concerns of on the impact of pandemic among the business, ICH-related business, especially in regards to the ability to attract audience. Also asking few pertinent and important questions, collecting key data, including on the recovery duration after the pandemic. Among the strategies that he mentioned include the offering of grants, organization transformation grants, to help business owners to diversify their business, including using some innovation, such as, interestingly, for me personally, the use of 3D scanning technology for future references database that will also help to shorten the duration of production. He mentioned about, again, community effort by using one example, the hawker culture, and how they use social media using Facebook called Hawker United, not Manchester United, but Hawker United, Dapao 2020. In Malaysia, we call Tapao. It's a Facebook group, very interesting way to cope with the pandemic. Also, Ramadan Together, and another interesting one for me personally, the use of Zoom meditation on Vesak Day. Also, the use of augmented and virtual reality. That's very innovative. Okay, finally, our final presentation, Mr. Muhammad Shahrin Abdullah. He presents the conceptual structure of heritage, including the National Heritage Act 2005. He also presents the administrative structure in putting the act into action or practice. by the establishment of the Post Commissioner of Heritage, also establishment of National Heritage Council, National Heritage Register, and National Heritage Fund. He also spoke about the functions of the commissioner, also in regards to 4 primary goals of UNESCO Convention of Culture. Definition of Icich is also mentioned. He talked about Malaysia's Icich listed in the convention, such as Makyong, Dondang Sayang, Silat, Pantun, Wangkang, and recently Songket. He talked about the importance again of community as the main actor in safeguarding Icich and the importance of supporting the community. Few strategies during and perhaps also after the pandemic: deferment of monthly income tax, discount of monthly electrical bills, human resource development fund levies, special relief facilities for small and medium scale enterprises, withdrawal of EPF, also special budget allocation, mentioned here 2.2 million, encouraging organizing engagement session, establishment of online marketing, among many, online lectures for tourist guides, and many more. Okay, with that, I conclude today's session. Thank you very much to the organizer for appointing me as the moderator. Terima kasih. Thank you to all the 6 distinguished panels for their very insightful presentations. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all who joined this session for your kind participation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Peace be upon you. I pass the floor to our MC.
Thank you very much, Professor Hasnul Jamal Saidon and our panelists. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the 3-day International Conference on Intangible Cultural Heritage. But don't forget to fill in the form via clicking the link in the chat box for the issuance of your certificate. It has been a wonderful 3 days afternoon spent learning on safeguarding cultural heritage. I have learned so much myself, and I hope that the same goes to all of you. Again, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the organizers, UNESCO Jakarta, University Malaysia Kelantan, Aswara, and the Department of National Heritage, Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture for organizing this conference. To all the moderators, panelists, and participants for participating in this ICICH 2022. I wish all of you a great weekend ahead and thank you very much. Don't forget to know, to love, and to safeguard our intangible cultural heritage. But before I conclude this session, allow me, on behalf of the organizer, to present a gratitude poem from the National Heritage of Department in the form of pantun. Bersarang lebah di pohon palas, burung kelicap di pohon selasih, pengetahuan bertambah, penerangan jelas. Jabatan Warisan mengucapkan terima kasih. Thank you and see you again.
true.